The American Revolution. The settlement of America. During the Age of Exploration, Europeans began colonizing in North America. England granted joint stock charters to colonists who were searching for wealth or religious freedom. From 1607 to 1733, England established 13 colonies in America. The colonies were very different and lacked unity. Economics and government in America. England used mercantilism to control colonial trade and increase their profits. Despite these trade restrictions, the colonists made money trading with England. England used a policy called salutary neglect, which allowed colonists freedom to make their own laws and taxes. Americans created their own colonial assemblies and enjoyed self-government. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763. For 150 years, colonists were happy with this relationship with England. But everything changed after the French and Indian War. In 1754, England and France went to war for 7 years over territory in America. In 1763, England won the war, and the Treaty of Paris gave England all French lands east of the Mississippi River. But the war left England with massive debts. To pay off war debts, Britain created a series of new taxes on the American colonists. The colonists were upset that Parliament in England would pass laws without the colonists' approval. Their slogan became, "No taxation without representation." Colonists responded to new taxes with boycotts, refusing to buy British goods that were taxed. Boycotts were effective, but the King and Parliament believed the Americans should obey British laws and took power away from the colonial assemblies. From 1763 to 1776, tensions between the English government and the American colonists increased. Americans were literate and read books by leading Enlightenment thinkers, especially John Locke, and used these ideas to justify their protest. People are born with natural rights, including life, liberty, and property. Kings can be overthrown if they violate people's natural rights. Government power comes from the consent of the governed. British abuses of Enlightenment ideas inspired Americans to declare independence. Changing idea: colonial attachment to Britain. The old idea was American colonists considered themselves to be subjects of the British king. New idea: after a long train of perceived abuses by the king, the colonists asserted their right to declare independence. Ben Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson served on the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. The American Philosophes: John Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. On July 4, 1776, Americans sent King George III the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence analysis. What did the Declaration of Independence say, and why was it such a revolutionary document? Examine the excerpts of the Declaration of Independence and match the quotes with the appropriate summary sentence. The Declaration of Independence and influences from the Enlightenment. Jefferson begins the Declaration by attempting to legally and philosophically justify the revolution that was already underway. Here, Jefferson is saying that now that the colonists have begun to separate themselves from British rule, it is time to explain why the colonists have taken this course of action. The Declaration of Independence used ideas from the Enlightenment, especially John Locke, to explain why Americans were declaring independence. The American Revolution lasted from 1775 to 1783. After 6 years of fighting, the Americans defeated the British at the Battle of Yorktown. The Treaty of Paris, 1783, granted the United States independence from Britain and all lands east of the Mississippi River. With independence, the United States needed a national government to unite the new nation. Government structure. The Founding Fathers created a federal system that created a national government but allowed the 13 states to keep power and make their own laws. Many of the ideas of the Enlightenment served as inspiration for the new national government of the United States. Analyzing the Constitution. How did the Enlightenment influence the structure of power of the national government under the U.S. Constitution? Examine each of the following images and guess what it reveals about the structure or power of the U.S. government. match each idea to the Enlightenment philosophe who supported it. Your word bank is John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Cesare Beccaria, and Voltaire. Constitution concept number 1. Popular sovereignty. The framers of the Constitution created a democratic republic, a form of government where the people elect their leaders. The U.S. Constitution was inspired by John Locke's idea that government power comes from the, quote, consent of the governed. The Constitution also used Rousseau's idea of a direct democracy because congressmen and the president are elected directly by the people, a majority rule. Sort of. Constitution concept number 2. The 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. Limited government. The Founding Fathers were afraid of giving the national government too much power, so they stated exactly which powers the government had, and all other powers were left to the state governments or to the people. Both Locke and Baron de Montesquieu shared the idea of limiting government power. Locke believed that a limited government was the only way to protect individual liberties. Constitution concept number 3. Legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Separation of powers. The Constitution uses separation of powers to divide the powers among 3 branches. The legislative branch consists of a Congress that makes laws and taxes. The executive branch consists of the president, vice president, and bureaucracy that enforces laws passed by Congress. The judicial branch is the Supreme Court and other federal courts that interpret laws, settle disputes, and decide guilt. This idea was inspired by none other than Baron de Montesquieu. Constitution concept number 4. Checks and balances. To keep one branch from seizing all power, the framers of the Constitution used a system of checks and balances. Each branch of government holds powers over the other 2 branches as a means to limit their power. This idea was also inspired by Montesquieu. Constitution concept number 5. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Protect the First Amendment. Individual liberty. The Founding Fathers added a Bill of Rights to the Constitution in order to guarantee that the government could not violate liberty. Among these liberties are the freedoms of speech, press, and religion. The framers of the Constitution were inspired by the ideas of Voltaire. Constitution concept number 6. We the people. 8th Amendment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Due process. The Bill of Rights includes a number of protections of the rights of accused people. The Bill of Rights guarantees Americans freedom from self-incrimination, right to a speedy trial, and protection from cruel and unusual punishment. These protections of accused people were supported by Cesare Beccaria. The American Revolution was an important event in world history. It was the first time a colony overthrew its mother country. It was the first time a government was created using Enlightenment ideas and limited government and individual liberty. The success in America inspired revolutions in Europe and Latin America.